This week on the Orange Box Podcast, we talk about the Nintendo Switch 2 image leaks, a Vita Japan Studio game returning, PlayStation 6, and more. All of this tonight, but first, on to that beautiful bean intro. Welcome to the place where PC and console gaming talk combine. This is the Orange Box Podcast, episode 50. I am your host, the man who is hoping the Switch 2 still does not have an OLED screen, so he is not tempted to buy it at launch, Nathan, also known as the Frozen Gamer 87. And joining me, as always, the man who only needs Metroid Prime 4 to be in the Switch 2's launch lineup to buy it on day one, Justin, better known as I Am Zaracon. How you doing today? How's your week been?
Not bad, I'd say. Sunday, my aunt, she invited us to a special event at her church, just sort of a homecoming sort of service for people who had been to the church before in the past, and just to get old members to come back. So went to that. It was definitely a good time. And the crazy thing is, we weren't members at that church, but we did a whole lot of stuff at that church. We were part of different programs, my family and I were. So it had been a long time since I'd been there. So, just walking back in there and then remembering all the different stuff that happens, remembering a lot of different faces. I mean, I only saw one person from before, but just remembering from being a young child and then just like remembering all the things that happened there, remembering all the different people I saw. It definitely was a sort of like it was a special moment for me going back there. But that pretty much was it. I mean, had one issue which I sort of mentioned where internet wasn't working. I was hoping that I would be able to get back in time before the podcast, but definitely that was fixed. So definitely grateful for that. So things are definitely back up and running.
That's good. Good to hear. Let's see here. My week has been fairly uneventful for the most part. Most of it's just pretty standard stuff. Something I got to tell you about that we made on Friday for pizza night. So, this is inspired by a local pizza chain, or it's really just a general store that also does pizza. And I've done a couple of pizzas on my cooking channel that are based on their pizzas. But this one, I mean, we haven't tried theirs yet, but we saw it advertised as a new thing and it sounded amazing. We had all the ingredients for it, so we went ahead and made it. A jalapeno popper pizza. So you start with cream cheese, then you put cheese on top of it. They do mozzarella and cheddar. We only had mozzarella, so that's what we did. And then jalapenos, pickled jalapenos, homemade bacon, and then a drizzle, after baking, a drizzle of hot honey. It's really, really good. It was so good. I didn't film it or anything, mostly just because it was not really a situation where it was easy to do that, especially because we had my niece and nephews over for dinner on Friday so that my sister and her husband could go out on a date. They went and saw Am I Racist? The Matt Walsh thing, comedy. So it's supposed to be very, very funny. But yes. Anyway, So I made it then, but that's the only thing like really of note I can think of. That's just out of the ordinary. Everything else has been pretty standard for the most part. I feel like there's something I'm forgetting about. I guess all the rest of the stuff has been kind of just related to the channels, particularly trying to do recordings for both my big three system comparison and for another one, and just having various issues with the recordings. And like one of the games, and I'll get into what games these are when we get to that section of the talk here. so that one of the games, it's a short game, so the recordings are shorter, so theoretically it wouldn't have been hard to re-record, but it was just timing wasn't really working out. So that one, like, one of the two systems, I think the footage came out fine and is usable. The other one, it didn't come out as well because I've been, messing with the different camera settings, trying to get the lighting just right so that you get an accurate idea of what it looks like in person on the screen. And it didn't come out the best. And then on top of that, I also died at a point I didn't want to be dying because it just kind of ruined the comparison itself. So I ended up not doing anything with that, and I'm just going to have to re-record that one portion over the weekend when I have time. But then the other one, it's just, I honestly am starting to think it might just be cursed because, like, I initially recorded one portion or one system, and the one system, it seemed like the footage was fine other than the fact that I was sick when I was recording, so I had to pause it a lot, and there will be a lot of stuff I have to cut out from that standpoint. And then the middle one, it seemed like the footage was just basically I needed to re-record like the beginning of the footage, like the first 20 to 40 minutes. And so I thought I was going to have to re-record that. And then the third one, it was about the same thing, where it was just like the first half of the footage I felt like I needed to re-record. So I had the one that the third one, I thought, okay, I need to re-record this whole portion, this whole half of the thing. And I started recording it, and I realized partway through, because I'd been recording the other thing before, that I hadn't fixed my camera mount so that it was higher up, because it needed to be higher up so that I could get 3 images on the screen without it being funky. And so I recorded like the first 20 minutes before realizing, oh, I forgot to zoom this out, because like it looked great, the image looked great and everything, but I forgot to zoom out. I forgot to get my camera mount up higher so that it would be zoomed out enough so that it'd be consistent all the way through. And so I just finished recording all the way up to the 45-ish minute point that I needed to have done. And then I had to go back later and re-record that first 20 minutes with the camera at the right position. And this is after having to go back and re-record that first 40 minutes. So it's like I'm having to re-record and re-record and re-record. I think that the footage that I have for that system is good now. Even though it's split up between 3 videos basically. And it's kind of wonky from that standpoint. But I think the footage overall is fine for that. So that's that I'm less concerned about. But then the middle one, I had recorded. I initially thought, okay, there's about half the footage, give or take, that probably needs to be recorded because it's a little too bright. And I thought that the color balance was good enough on the second half to where it could work. And I think that ultimately I'm just going to have to kind of leave the second half of the footage alone and just say, it's fine. I can live with this. But when re-recording that portion of the footage, there's like this weird like purple stripe that goes across the screen in the recording. It's not like that in person, and I know it's just because of the lighting settings and everything, but I'm trying to get the lighting just right so you get an accurate representation of what the colors look like, because that's the biggest thing with this screen. And this game is just like, it really it's a great demonstration of how great an OLED screen can look. And I don't know, I need to like try and decide whether I want to just leave it alone and then just make a note and say, hey, there is this weird purple stripe that goes across in the video, but it's not present on the actual system. It's a weird artifact, and it was the only way that I could get it to where the colors were consistent enough, where they actually matched what I see in reality. And so there's that, but then I'm looking back at the footage for that second half, and I'm like, this doesn't look quite the same as the re-recorded footage, and so I'm just not sure if I need to re-record that second half. And then on top of that, the first one that I recorded I thought it was fine, but looking at it as I was trying to edit everything this evening, because I started trying to work on it, it is brighter than I would like it to be, and I don't know. At this point, I'm trying to decide whether it's going to be better for me to re-record some footage to try and fix it to make it more uniform, or if I just leave it as is and say, hey, I had to record these over multiple sessions. The lighting is going to be different sometimes. The detail levels are not going to be perfect. The color representation is not perfect, but it's a fairly accurate representation, because like I've become kind of obsessed about this, because I want it to be good because of how much time I put into this, and how, I don't want to look at it as like a sunk cost fallacy, that, oh, I put so much time into it, I have to get this done. It's more like I want to get this done because I think it's going to be really interesting, but I just have so many issues with these recordings, and it's just not quite right. And basically, the main thing is, number one, it's probably going to be I'm just delaying this one indefinitely until I can figure out exactly what I'm doing with it, and going to do other stuff in between. And I'm probably going to be changing things up a bit and not making these comparisons the primary focus of my channel, because I just don't have time to do all of these. I need to supplement it with other content that's easier to put out regularly, and then I have these like once a month or something, have some comparisons, because it's like I like doing them. It's just that it's very time consuming, and if I have issues with recording, especially when I'm really trying to get the color balance just right, I just don't know what to do with that. So I'm not sure what I'm doing with that yet, but I do know that I'm at the very least delaying this indefinitely, and I may very well end up doing the later game in the series before I do this one, because it's a disaster, and I don't know. It's just too much. I put too much work on myself, and I need to try and figure out the right way to do this, because I want to put out more content and I want it to be consistent, but I don't know that I can actually do it in the consistent manner that I want to do it, because I just don't have the time for it, if that makes sense. So
yeah, that makes sense. And I definitely don't want to see you get burned out because you're putting so much work into it. You said that you had to record multiple, you said first it was 45 minutes, and then you have to record another 20 minutes, and that's of each, and I'm assuming of each different device, correct? So
well, not of each different device. It's kind of split up between different devices. Like one I did in a single setting, it was like 2 hours of recording. The next one I did everything in roughly 2 hours of recording, and ended up eventually having to go back and re-record the first 45 minutes, and then realized that the first 20 minutes of that recording was wrong because I had it too close, and so I had to re-record that 20 minutes again. And then the third one, I did the full 2 hours or whatever it was initially, and then had to re-record the first 45 minutes. Mm-hmm. So more than anything, it's like, I think the main reason why this is bothering me so much is because I was getting stuff out every week for a while there. And yes, of course, the fact that I chose to do the longer comparisons is certainly a big part of the reason why hasn't been as consistent as I wanted it to be, because I decided to make it more complicated, try to sync things up and everything else, and try to just make improvements. It's like I went from, this is something super simple that I can just throw together in 2-3 hours, to something that can take me 8+ hours to put together. And that's just with the 2 game comparisons. And that's not even, obviously that's also not counting the amount of time that I spent recording on top of that. So I just, I think because I haven't put anything out in a while, I feel much more pressure. Like I feel like I need to get something out, and so yeah, I need to get something out. I need to figure out a way to have consistency because the channel is never going to become something that can earn an income if this is all I'm doing. But I also can't just do this because this one is just too much work. What I need to do is the first thing that I want to do is I want to start getting clips of the podcast up. And my intention is post them on my main channel with, of course, link to the episode that it's a clip from and all of that. So that way, because the shorter clips are more likely to get people to watch than people seeing a 2.5 hour podcast and having to try and, I don't think anyone's even getting it suggested to them, which is why we have almost no views on the podcast. But anyway, I've talked long enough about all that stuff. I'll probably at least be putting out cooking videos starting next week. I'll start editing. Edit probably a couple of them next Monday and then go from there. Or Monday or Tuesday and go from there. But anyway, what have you been playing?
All right, so I got a friend of mine got me a game called Katana Zero, and this is something that was on my wish list for a while. And actually, he didn't even know this was on my wish list, but he had been playing the game recently. He started it, and at first when I played the game, I was thinking it was a game similar to The Messenger, or any other type of NES Ninja Gaiden sort of like throwback type of game like that. I couldn't be further from the truth because it is more of a fast-paced, I guess run and slash rather than run and gun. It's run and slash because everything is a one-hit kill, whether it's for you or the enemies. You will go down in a single hit, but the catch is you can rewind the level. And I'm gonna just leave it at that because there's a whole reason in the story as to why that happens, but I don't want to explain it now because I feel like that just gets too much into the story. But it's definitely a very interesting game, and unfortunately, I had taken a short break from when I first started playing to like when I started recording, so some of the mechanics I completely did not have a full grasp on, or I forgot about initially rewinding time and stuff, and then I also didn't dodge as much as I should have, but it's definitely very interesting. It's also a whole lot more darker and mature than I initially thought, because again, I was thinking this is more like The Messenger and like NES style games, but it definitely is a more mature story. Also, there's a whole lot of dialogue options that you get, and it really, from my friend told me, it influences so many different aspects of the game as far as like things that can happen, including like what happens in the missions. I partially saw what happened and saw what he meant because of decisions that I made on one level. Definitely influenced things, and it got kind of crazy. But it's definitely a very fun game, I'd say. I think I'm about halfway through the game already. It's not completely long, I'd say. I mean, maybe if I didn't mess up several places as much as I did, I mean, it probably might be something maybe no more than 8 hours. But granted, this is just speculation on my end. But
right.
Yeah, definitely a fun game. So I've been playing also more of Kingdom Hearts Rechain of Memories. I finished Sora's story mode, and actually I spent a good portion of the time grinding for the last few cards that I could get in Sora's story mode, because the last, like, I think maybe 8 or so cards you actually get after you beat Riku's story. So I went ahead, fought Marluxia, He actually wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. The first fight you have with him, I only died once because I wasn't certain what he would do, and I was very nervous, especially since the Game Boy Advance version gave me a lot of trouble. But he was so much easier, and he was not as aggressive as other bosses had been beforehand. And then when I went to his second boss fight, did not know that they were going to give him a second phase, and the design was so Tetsuya Nomura. I mean, like, you look at this thing, you're like, oh yeah, I could tell he designed this boss.
Is that the one where it's like a weird whale-like creature or something? Is that right?
This one's kind of like, okay, so like the first one, I don't even remember if this was in the Game Boy Advance version, but it's sort of like a ship, but there's a head on as a part of the ship, and I never noticed that in the Game Boy Advance version. So maybe it was there, but I didn't notice it.
I think it was.
Sprites.
Maybe I'm remembering wrong. But yeah.
I definitely remember it this time. And then the second part, though, it was more like you have Genova right there. Like, Genova was part of the fight. So that was like, wow, that was really weird. And also, I made a meme a long time, like probably about like a good while ago, based on the Game Boy Advance version, about like saying like how at the very beginning of the game, during the tutorial, Marluxia says, exhaust all your cards and I'll show you what happens after that. And then when you do that, he says, there, now without your cards, you have no power. And so the joke I made was, at this point, Marluxia should just attack and defeat Sora, and then he would pretty much be able to complete his plan. He does something similar in this second phase of the fight, where he actually will get rid of all the cards in your deck, and you have to pick them up if you want to get them again. So I thought that was I thought that was interesting. But I completed that, and I did not die at all, which surprised me because I didn't think I had enough cards in my deck to actually last long enough. But so I started Riku's story mode, and it's not as hard as I thought it would be, or at least so far it's not as difficult. And the real reason why is because Riku's decks in each floor are preset, and you cannot rearrange them. You can't get new cards to add. Everything is set. So you have to work with the cards that you are dealt, no pun intended, in order to get through each level. So whereas normally I would recommend with Sora saying like, yeah, make sure you have a bunch of cards that have a value of say 6 and higher. Here they're completely random, so not really much you can do there. So you definitely have to also know the order of the cards in each deck, so that way you can sort of plan around that. But the good news is that you can also make things somewhat easier, because Riku, unlike Sora, where his attacks are linked to the cards he uses, Riku can actually increase his attack power. So with leveling up, so that's something that is great. So you can just continuously get stronger throughout the game. But also, Dark Mode is... I loved this in the Game Boy Advance version, just because he's so much faster in Dark Mode. And also, being able to... he's stronger, he's faster, and it's just so much fun playing with him in Dark Mode. It seems like it takes longer for some reason in the remake version to get to Dark Mode, but when you get to it, I mean, granted, also, I'm only playing so far against basic enemies, so I can't really have too much fun with it. But I feel like once I actually get to a boss fight and use Dark Mode, it's going to feel so much fun, just because I'm going to be a whole lot faster, deal more damage, and it's just great. But yeah, that's pretty much that with Kingdom Hearts. I'll see how far I can get. I mean, I've gone through a couple floors so far. But yeah, I feel like because his story isn't necessarily as long, because it doesn't do as much as Sora does, it shouldn't be too bad. But yeah. And then lastly, there's no gameplay footage for this, but I played some more Stardew Valley with some friends of mine. We were trying to get some more of these special item drops that come from the more difficult enemies, and we've been trying to grind for them so much, but we haven't been able to get any of them. And we're hoping we can at least get enough for one of us to craft a special weapon, because once we are able to craft that, we're able to buy it from a special vendor, so that we don't have to worry about crafting it for all of us, because as much time as it takes for just crafting for one. So we're hoping we can get that done out of the way so we can knock that out. And then also we're also just trying to work on getting enough items for making the special totem that transports us from our farm to another island, so that way we don't have to worry about wasting so much time in the day trying to get from one place to another. But yeah, that's pretty much everything I've been playing.
Cool. Yeah, Katana Zero just basically makes me think of like a 2D Ghost Runner because of the
that's a very good
the single hit. I mean, minus the parkour stuff, because it didn't really seem like it had parkour a whole lot, but and obviously, you know, you talk about the choices affecting the way that the story progresses is not a Ghost Runner thing. But yeah, cool. All right, so since I already went into a bit of a diatribe about all of the issues I've had with the comparison recording stuff, I'll just kind of mention, first of all, briefly, I do want to mention, played Lego Star Wars and Lego Harry Potter with my boys. Since I had the Joy-Cons back, we got to play Mario Party Superstars together. Me, the boys, and my wife all played that, so that was a bit of fun. And then as far as the comparison stuff, so obviously the longer comparison that I was doing was Persona 4 Golden, so I re-recorded a bunch of stuff for that for both the Steam Deck and the Switch. And I think the Steam Deck is probably like the footage is pretty much good. I'm not too concerned about that. I think that's pretty much as good as it's going to be. And then the others, I'm not entirely sure yet if I just want to put it out with the footage I have and just make notes that there's some differences there and then try to do better in the future, or if I want to actually try and re-record the stuff that really needs to be re-recorded. And I don't know, but I'm not going to worry about it too much. I still love the game. I just am tired of going through that opening section again because it's so long. I mean, at least in re-recording, I wasn't re-recording the full 2 hours, because that would have been much more difficult to do, but it's still just a pain. So there's that. But then I did record gameplay for Outer Wilds on both the Switch and the Steam Deck, and the Steam Deck is where I had some issues with the recording that I'm just not quite satisfied with it, and I accidentally got myself killed before the end of the 22-minute cycle, so it's like, I'm just gonna need to re-record that. So, plus I missed doing some of the things I did on the Switch version, and so even though they're not going to be one-to-one anyway, because there are just some slight differences, it's still just something where I feel like I probably need to re-record. So I will be doing that. But then the bulk of where I spent my time with games. So first of all, I do want to note I don't have the gameplay. I don't have any gameplay recorded. Since I was getting close to the end of Jedi Fallen Order, I was thinking, I think I might want to try jumping into another Souls game, like an actual Souls-like game. And so I downloaded, installed Code Vein on my Steam Deck. I played for a little bit, and I didn't mind the gameplay. I actually thought it was pretty decent. I mean, I was just testing it out briefly because I was still in the middle of Jedi Fallen Order, but I ultimately decided I'm not sticking with it, and it's really just because of the waifu character designs. It's distracting to the point where I think it's really going to affect me negatively in terms of my Christian walk. So I'm like, no, I can't do that. Even if it's only once in a while that they show up, it's just, this is not going to be good for me. So I uninstalled it after playing maybe an hour, if that. I mean, I thought that the game, the combat was pretty decent. It's just, it's those character designs that it's going to be really detrimental to me. I can't do that. So, I did go ahead and install Elden Ring, and I'll get into the bit that I played of that after I talk about Jedi Fallen Order. So, first of all, I want to note with Jedi Fallen Order, of course, I finished it. I completed it 100%, or well, I got all achievements, and there's like maybe a couple of like scans and stuff that I didn't get, but there's not much. There's maybe just 2 or 3 things. It's possible actually I even did get all of the scans, and that because I didn't have to have every single scan in the game in order to get all achievements, but I don't think there's much of any that I would have missed. But anyway, so the footage that's playing right now is recorded from the Steam Deck. I recorded a few boss fights that way, and none of the bosses were like super duper difficult. I mean, granted, I was just playing on normal, but you know, they were good. They were all, most of them, like there was like 3 different or 4 different lightsaber wielding enemies that I had to fight. One of which was I fought like 3 times, but yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything I need to really say about that. You know, like I said, this definitely was one of the least difficult Souls games. Well, it was the least difficult Souls game I played. Souls-like. And it's definitely much more Metroidvania than Souls-like. For the most part. I did really enjoy it. Obviously, the fact that I went for all the achievements should say that. I mean, should make that pretty clear. The one thing I will note is that this game does not have any sort of fast travel. So, well, with the exception of, you know, taking the ship to go to planets. That's as close as there is to a fast travel. But there's no fast travel between like the different meditation points, which are basically like save points. So it's much more old school Metroidvania from that standpoint. And from a lore standpoint, it does make sense. You can't teleport between those points, but man, it was very tedious trying to get all the remaining collectibles and stuff, especially if it happened to be something where like I didn't realize I was missing something on a particular planet, and so I, you know, went basically all the way to the end of an area to get a particular thing, thinking that I had gotten everything I needed. I took the closest thing to a fast travel that was available, like on Kashyyyk, which is, you know, the Wookiee planet. There's like this giant bird that can fly you from near the end of the level back to near the beginning. And then I realized after the fact that there was something close to that bird that I needed. And that's just one of several examples. There's one planet, the planet Dathomir, which is basically it's the planet where like Darth Maul would have come from, and other people of his kind. And so this planet like has certain sections where it's very much a maze, and it's just like it's very difficult to find your way around. And so I had to go back there like 4 times. And the last time I was there, or the last couple times I was there, it was just, okay, I was trying to get to a particular spot with a particular scan that I needed for one of the achievements. And then I also needed to get a certain treasure chest, which, I mean, thankfully there were only 4 there, and like each section of the map tells you like what percentage you're at for having explored the area, as well as the number of like if you have any chests that you still need or any secrets that you still need to find. So at least from that standpoint, you know, it's not quite as bad because I don't have to hunt as much. But it's sometimes just getting to that point on the map that can be difficult. And then even if I get to that point in the map, then it's also having to trek all the way back to the beginning of the area. I mean, the beginning of the world back to my ship. And sometimes there's shortcuts that help with that, but a lot of times there isn't. And so it's just the traversal from that standpoint is just so tedious. And it's like, yes, I understand this is what it was in the old Metroid games. This is the case in Super Metroid as well. But Super Metroid, I think, didn't feel quite as bad, mostly because of the fact that that was like a 2D game, and so it was easier to navigate. I know Prime, I had issues like that at times too, but I don't feel like it was ever quite as bad with Prime. I don't know. Either way, I do know that the next game actually does have fast travel, which is so good. I'm so glad that they decided to put it in, even if it's not lore accurate. Like, I don't care. The lack of fast travel just, I mean, having fast travel will make a huge difference when it comes to cleaning up remaining collectibles and everything else. And it doesn't even have to necessarily be fast travel to every single point in there, even though I'm pretty sure it is. As long as there's enough to where it's less tedious to get around, that's fine. But yeah, so I did go ahead and finish it, and now I actually have footage playing from what is basically the last boss of the game. I'll say this isn't really all that much of a spoiler, because this is like this person's basically the first boss you fight in the tutorial portion of the game. But this is, the actual last time you fight her. And of course, obviously on PC, it looks and runs way better. Steam Deck, I definitely had times where the performance got really bad. I mean, it was never like as bad as that one time in Ratchet and Clank where it felt like it was 2 frames per second, but it definitely on the Steam Deck, there were times where it would drop into the 20s. Usually resetting the deck would help with that, and then I would be fine. But just occasionally I had problems with it, and so yeah. But the last boss fight was good, of course. The main thing is, and this is, I mean, it's a minor spoiler, but it's pretty obvious that it would happen. After you defeat the last boss, Darth Vader shows up. And holy crap, they made him terrifying. Like, you legitimately felt afraid for your life because of how strong he was. To me, it felt kind of similar to like when you come across the SAX in Metroid Fusion and you're having to run away from it. And of course, like in this case, you don't really have the option to fight him. Like, you sort of start, quote unquote, fighting him, but you don't actually really fight him. And yeah, he's just like, they legitimately made him terrifying. And I mean, when I say terrifying, I don't mean like, oh my gosh, I'm scared, and everything, but just like super tense, because not because like you're playing hide and seek from him or anything, but because he's chasing after you. And then there's like this point where you think you've gotten away from him, you've gone up this elevator, and then you open the door to the elevator and he's right there, and it's like but yeah, you don't really have to fight him for real. And I mean, it makes sense because, obviously you can't actually beat him because, he's there later in the story, in the main story. I should note, in case it wasn't already clear, this game, the story takes place in between episodes 3 and 4. So it's basically, it starts, or the main character, Cal Kestis, was one of the Jedi Padawans who survived Order 66, and then he went into hiding for a long time, and now he's gone off to because they tracked him down, essentially. And then he finds out there's like a Jedi holocron that has a list of all the Force sensitive kids in the universe or in the galaxy. So yeah, I mean, that's basically the basic premise. Like, the story is nothing other than just pretty standard Star Wars fare, but it was still pretty good. I'm definitely interested in playing the next game. I'm not spending $70 on it for sure. Just because, for one, I don't have the money right now. Two, I don't really have a need to play it. And three, something I'm at least considering, because a friend brought it up to me, is checking out Game Pass, the PC Game Pass, because I have like a few different cards for free Game Pass trials. So I could theoretically just try out PC Game Pass, play Jedi Survivor that way, and then just eventually buy the game once it goes on sale enough to be worth spending money on it. But either way, I definitely want to play it. But since, of course, I finished this one up, and got all the achievements last night, I went ahead and booted up Elden Ring, which the footage here is from my Steam Deck. I specifically I've actually only played it so far on the Steam Deck, and I'm not sure if the footage did not. Okay, yeah, the footage is all there. I don't know. That was weird. Anyway, so I initially was trying to decide whether I wanted to potentially start over with Elden Ring, because I hadn't played it in quite a while. But the main thing is that I didn't really want to restart, because I had put like 60 hours into the game and had a character in like level 61 or 62, 63, something like that. But so initially, the area where I was kind of stuck was the Raya Lucaria Academy. And I don't know how much of Elden Ring you actually played, but I was trying, like, I had been stuck there for a while, and I was trying to get to the boss, just going through blind initially. And this area I kept going to, I would get to a certain point, and then I would die, and sometimes I'd get a little bit farther, but I'd still end up dying. And I look it up, and it turns out the boss wasn't even in the direction I was going. I mean, like, she was in the area. I mean, she was in that general map area, but I was going way off, like up some stairs to the left and jumping over railings and going across buildings and going to, I don't even know where it ultimately leads to, when in reality, the spawn point that I had, I could have very easily just walked over. I walk across some beams and go up some stairs where I have to avoid a boulder in order to get to ultimately get to the room with the boss. So once I found that out, I went ahead and went over there. I think I had more trouble with the knight that was guarding the entrance to the boss room than I had with the boss herself. It still took me, I think, probably 5 or 6 tries. So I should clarify, this is Renala, Queen of the Full Moon. So the first time I fought her, I was going in completely blind. I didn't know, how to beat her or anything. Like, I think I had seen something from someone years ago, but I didn't actually know exactly what to do to beat her. And so I'm just going around, killing all these students on the ground, some of which are, like glowing yellow, and some of them are, holding up like a purple flame. And I'm just like, okay, I think I'm just supposed to kill these in order to eventually damage the boss. And it wasn't getting anywhere. I was wasting some of my flasks to heal myself. And by the time I figured out how I was supposed to actually be able to damage the boss, I was down to just 1 flask. And I ended up dying after doing maybe like 30% of her health or something like that. So once I figured it, so I went ahead and just looked it up. It's like, okay, how am I actually supposed to damage her? Because I don't want to waste a bunch of time. And, found out, okay, you're supposed to hit the students that have the yellow glowing halo thing around them because they're singing, and that's what's creating her shield. And when you destroy 3 of them, then she'll drop to the ground and you can damage her. So I went ahead and did that. Was able to get phase 2 a few times. I mean, like second try, it wasn't a problem to get phase 2. I just made the mistake of being a little too greedy when it came to trying to hit her after she did her Kamehameha attack, because I knew that I needed to stand right up next to her, which is like her opening attack in phase 2. You stand right next to her, she can't hit you, but then after that she backs up a little bit, and if you're not careful when she's getting ready to back up, then she'll back up and she can use a magic attack, and if you don't avoid it properly or get close to her, then she will kill you in one hit without much of any difficulty. So I went ahead and I had a few times where I died. Eventually I was able to get into phase 2. Well, not just get into phase 2, but get into phase 2 and actually keep consistent pressure on her to where I was able to go ahead and take her out. She wasn't able to really get much of any hits on me in that second phase because I just stayed right up close to her. I had just gotten Zweihander again for this game, which unfortunately doesn't have exactly the same moveset, but I've since been able to get used to the differences. And just, keep getting up to her, get in her face, and beat the crap out of her. The one thing is that she actually almost did end up killing me. Because she's after she's down, when she's down to like the last third or quarter of her health, she starts summoning different summons, and the second thing she summons is like the Bloodhound Knight or whatever he's called, and when he ended up very nearly killing me, thankfully he didn't, and I was able to actually take her down, but it was really close. Like he came very close to taking me out before I was able to get her, and yeah, but worked out pretty good. Was able to beat her. She wasn't terribly hard. I mean, the first phase, once I knew what to do, was actually really easy. It was really just the second phase that took me a little bit more to figure it out, and then once I figured it out, it was not terribly hard. I did ultimately figure out, though, that the best thing for me in that fight was not even to bother using a shield, but just to go in two-handed, because the shield doesn't really do anything unless you have something that repels magic, which I didn't. Or, not repels, but protects against magic. And the only shield I had, I don't remember which one it is, but it didn't have any real protection against magic, so it didn't defend enough from damage to where I could actually make use of it for that fight. And it was just easier to have two hands, especially because I didn't have what I needed in order to upgrade my Zweihander past +1. Because I needed like a certain type of I can't remember what they're called. It's some type of item that you need in order to upgrade weapons, and I have the higher level ones which you need for higher tiers for upgrading, but I don't have the low level ones, and because it's been so long since I played, I couldn't remember exactly where to get those, and ultimately just needed to I just need to look it up and find out where I need to go. But I don't have any footage recorded beyond that fight, but so right now I'm in let me look. I think I still have the game booted up on my Steam Deck. Right now I am in the ruin-strewn precipice, which is near oh, here we go. Gosh. It's something in Liurnia, I believe, is what it is. So, anyway. Yeah. That's everything I got.
All right. So I, yeah, definitely glad to hear about you enjoying Star Wars. I also was gonna ask you about if there was. I know you said that there wasn't any fast travel. I was wondering if there was something similar, but you explained that there sort of was with the birds and stuff like that that could fly around.
Yeah, but
Parts of the
that's
level.
just on one planet, and that's it.
Oh man. Oh gosh.
Yeah, I mean, there's I think 5 or 6 total planets. I can't remember exactly. Most of them are not that bad. It's just there's like 2 or 3 of them that it's really bad navigating sometimes, and much like in Metroid Prime, sometimes just those 3D maps make it really difficult to navigate. That's just how it goes. But
Yeah, and there's no sort of like shortcuts you can.
there are some, you can unlock some shortcuts, but there's only so many, and with the more complicated maps, they don't really do much for you.
Okay, yeah, and you also sort of answered another question of mine, which was, do you think you'll play the next game? But you mentioned that part already, and yeah, hopefully you can get that. You can start that up on Game Pass and get some of that. And I don't know if this would work or not, but I mean, I'm wondering maybe if, depending on where the save file is located, if you could copy that save file and transfer that to like the Steam version or not. I don't know how it works, but I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I would have to find out about that.
So that way you wouldn't have to like necessarily start all over.
Right, yeah, that's a good point. But I mean, I'm not doing it anytime soon anyway. Mostly because it's like, even though I would like to play it, God of War Ragnarok comes out tomorrow, and
oh, that's right.
I mean, I have it preloaded, all 190 gigs of it. My goodness, it's huge. But I'm going to when I don't know when I'm actually going to get time to play it. It largely depends on what my weekend looks like, and since I haven't decided yet if I'm going to be trying to work on that Persona 4 Golden comparison, I probably won't be. I will probably end up having a decent chunk of either my Saturday or Sunday working on a video. More likely it's going to be Saturday so that I'm not as crunched for time. But yeah, so God of War Ragnarok, but it won't be playable on Steam Deck because of the fact that it requires the PSN login, which you can't do on Linux, at least not right now. I hope that Sony just makes it possible in the future, because if they did that, then that would instantly increase sales of their game. I mean, it's like people would absolutely buy God of War Ragnarok if they had the ability to play it on the Steam Deck, and there's no reason why it shouldn't. I mean, the system requirements, it should easily run on the Steam Deck, even if it's only 30 frames. And more likely than not, you could probably fiddle with some stuff and get it to 40, and then you'd have that happy medium. But either way, since I'll only be able to play that on my PC, Elden Ring I can play on my Steam Deck, and they control similarly enough to where I shouldn't have any issues with going back and forth between the two. The one thing I'm gonna definitely have to do is probably change a couple buttons on God of War so that it's not throwing me off, because there's definitely a few things where like the dodge button's in a different location and sprint is a different location. Sprint is less of an issue, but there's just a few things where it would definitely help me out if I change some of the buttons around. But the main attacks are also on R1 and R2, just like, and then L1 for blocking, and I can't remember what. Oh yeah, that's right. R2's for throwing your axe, or for aiming the axe or the Chaos Blades. But anyway.
And I mean, I know you said that you were about, or at least you were 60 hours in and roughly around level 60. About how far into Elden Ring are you?
I honestly have no idea, because I definitely did things way out of order. Like, I've done a handful of the actual like bosses that you're supposed to do it in order. But the thing is that I got thrown off in the beginning when I was playing it because there's this chest in the ruins right near by your when you first start off in Limgrave, the ruins that are near the dragon. So there's this chest that if you open it up, it teleports you to a location in gosh, what's the name of the place? It's like a town with a bunch of ghost mages.
Oh no.
So but you get teleported to this crystal cave that's right before it, and there's a boss in there that I've attempted a couple times, but I haven't beaten him. Yeah, you get teleported to this town, and I didn't even think about it, the fact that I could have just used fast travel to get back to the other Grace. So I spent a bunch of time in this place, learning where all the enemies were and killing them and grinding there, and I mean, eventually I figured out, oh yeah, I can leave anytime. And, then I was able to, do that and move forward. I think that happened before I even had my horse because
Oh no.
because I hadn't even gotten to that area. It's just like I got teleported to this area I didn't want to be at because enemies were way too strong. And yeah, but yeah, I mean, like I know I've beaten, I think it's Margit the Fell Omen. I believe he's one of the ones I've beaten. And like I beat that wolf boss that was inside the church near Renala, or the academy, the Raya Lucaria Academy. And I've beaten some other miscellaneous bosses like the Blood Knight that has like the curved sword that he like swipes it and then dodges backwards. And I've used that in most of the game that I've been playing. So now I'm all about that Zweihander because it's my comfort zone, even though it doesn't by default the R2 attack. Because in Dark Souls, the R2 attack is just a big down swipe. In Elden Ring, it's a stab by default, but then the second time it's a strike. Or if you like get a running start before you do it, then it'll be a strike. So it's, I mean, like I've gotten used to it enough now, having played a bit of Elden Ring, but it's still just like I have to remind myself this doesn't control exactly the same way as it did in Dark Souls. I will say though, I had forgotten how much smoother the combat is in Elden Ring compared to Dark Souls, because it is way smoother. I mean, like I still absolutely love Dark Souls, and the one thing that I have as my complaint at the moment with Elden Ring, and I know this will probably change later on. I'm not sure how I feel about things not being as linear, I guess. I mean, Dark Souls isn't really linear because you can really technically do things in just about any order. There are some requirements here and there that you have to fulfill in order to get certain bosses, but the fact that it is so open, it's really easy to get to not be sure where to go next. And I mean, yes, I know that the Point of Grace, it does have like the little golden trail that helps you know which direction to go. And that does help, but the biggest problem for me right at the moment is because I did so many things in such weird order. I'm like going back trying to look at checklists and see if I can figure out what stuff I need to do to basically fill in all the stuff behind what I've done and in between the stuff I've done, so that I can actually like properly progress in the game. I mean, yeah, I'm well leveled up at this point. I'm not so much in the mentality of, oh, I need to worry about losing my runes. I just play the game, and it's like I expect to lose my runes sometimes. But on the plus side, the boss run backs in this are nowhere near as bad as in Dark Souls, as many of the ones in Dark Souls, because you typically have a site of grace shortly before the boss, and it's just like, thank you, Jesus. Or thank you, what's his face? the creator. Anyway, yeah, I've talked enough about that. I imagine there will be plenty of Dark Souls talk, or not, plenty of Elden Ring talk next week, in addition to talking about God of War. Assuming I actually have time to play it, because that's going to be tricky. But anyway. All right, anything else before we get into the news?
No, sir.
All right. So we got quite a bit of stuff to talk about this evening, so we'll try not to dwell on anything too long. The first thing, which is rather big, is that there was some leaked images, specifically leaked from a factory, from a factory worker in China. This, I believe it was China. It might have been Taiwan. I can't remember. Of the shells for the Switch 2 Joy-Cons, as well as the back plate of the new system. Based on that, people have come up with 3D rendered mock-ups of what this thing probably looks like. But the interesting thing is, let me see if I can find the actual... I forgot to bring up the... Give me 1 second. Sorry, I should have had this up. I had the article open, and then I just forgot to actually keep it. All right. Okay, so these images, like that, most of the images are just basically people making 3D renderings based on what they see with the shell and with the Joy-Con shells. And what we can see from the Joy-Con shells, what they show, there's definitely some similarities to the original Joy-Cons, but there's some differences as well. Most notably, the fact that it doesn't have the slide rail anymore. So this idea of the magnetic Joy-Cons that we'd previously heard about seems to definitely be the case. They've improved the SL and SR buttons on the inside of the controller. I mean, those look way better than the other ones, because the ones on the regular Joy-Cons are just like these little tiny things that are more or less concave. These ones look like they have a little more heft to them. I mean, they're bigger and less sunk into the Joy-Cons. Additionally, there's also there seems to be on the back of the shell a different kind of like button that you press in order to pull the Joy-Cons off. But instead of just being like this little black button, it's kind of like a button, something that you pull towards the outside of the Joy-Con in order to detach it. And then also of note is that the actual shells of the Joy-Cons from the images that we have here, there are the right Joy-Con now, well, I should say the layout in general is the same. It still has the split D-pad. Presumably you could just do these as two separate Joy-Cons, do multiplayer with single system. But then it also has, in addition to having the normal home button on the right-hand side, it also has a share button. At least it appears to be another share button. And then the left side is just the share button. We haven't seen the actual joysticks yet, other than, the mock-ups that people have made. But, everything we're seeing, at least based on the mock-ups, which I believe are probably pretty accurate, though I'm certainly hoping some things might be better. Seems like it's very, very similar to the original Switch, built more like the Switch OLED, minus the OLED screen most likely, except that it has two USB-C ports, one on top and one on the bottom, as well as the magnetic Joy-Cons and potentially IR sensors on both Joy-Cons this time around. And let's see here, I think there might have been something else. Some slight differences in some of the buttons on top as well. But I think that's about it. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah. I don't have much reason to doubt the legitimacy of this. I mean, granted, could not be real, but I mean, I think that it seems real enough to me that I'm willing to believe this. Especially with like some stuff relating to what we've already heard, like the magnetic Joy-Cons rather than using the rail system, which even with the description presented, I still would like to see it actually work in person, because my mind just still isn't completely grasping the idea of having a magnetic Joy-Con rather than the rail system. I mean, they probably have a way to make it work, but I don't know. It just doesn't seem all that secure to me.
Right.
Compared with the rail system. So I would definitely have to, again, see that in person to feel more comfortable with it. I am curious about, I'm very curious about the additional like button on, I think it was the right Joy-Con, just because, there was the right one originally was just the home button and the left one was like screen share or screen capture. So like the right Joy-Con had like an additional sort of like square button on it. So I am curious to know like what that one does. I mean, I mean offhand I can't think of anything that would make sense to have as an additional button. Maybe that's something we could see in a full like reveal where they say, hey, and here's the new feature that comes with our Joy-Cons and something like that. I mean, I doubt they would do something like this is just like a turbo mode, like put that one there. I doubt they would do Nintendo would do something like that. But I am curious to know about that. And even though this wasn't necessarily shown as far as with the shells, I really want to know. I mean, granted they've done stuff, especially with like the change what we've seen with the SR and LR buttons on the Joy-Cons, which definitely would seem to be better. And maybe if that probably wouldn't work since that requires a rail system. I was gonna say maybe with like the Joy-Con wrist straps, like maybe with the sort of like the thing you slide on top of, maybe that would also make pressing them a whole lot easier, because I definitely remember really wanting to actually use the Joy-Con, the wrist strap, because they actually made holding or pressing the buttons easier because they had the little bumps on them rather than having to like try to force your finger to click the buttons there. But I do hope that they improve their joysticks with the Switch 2. I mean, at the very least, please get us Hall sticks, Hall effect sticks, because
Yeah, right.
you should.
There's
be
no way
having
Nintendo's gonna do that.
I just wish they just do something. Like I feel like they should be able to do something a whole lot better than what they've done with the standard Joy-Con sticks. So definitely do something there. I mean, all in all, it definitely seems believable. I mean, it is pretty, for the most part, similar to the Switch, which hopefully it means especially with like the cartridge slot. Hopefully that means definitely confirms, or I mean, nothing's confirmed yet, but hopefully it supports the fact that the Switch 2 will be backwards compatible. Like that would be great. And perhaps even it would support the fact that maybe we might even get a boosted performance for games that support it, so that would also be great as well. But yeah, that's pretty much where I stand with this.
Yeah, and something that I saw about the supposed specs are that it's going to be let's see if I can find the information here. Might just be back on that article. Okay, so the Switch 2 is supposed to include 12 gigs of RAM compared to the 4 gigs of the original Switch. Support for HDMI 2.1, meaning potentially higher frame rates. Obviously, just depending on the game itself. Some 2D games could probably do higher frame rates. And 256 gigs of internal storage compared to the 32 of the base Switch. So, yeah, and like I was looking again at the image of the SL and SR buttons, and it looks like the new ones are like 4 times the size, because the ones on the Joy-Cons here are just like these little tiny things, little teeny tiny things. But it looks like they're at least 3 times the size, potentially at least 3 times bigger. It definitely looks like it's going to be better from that standpoint. I forgot to mention also that the console itself is bigger. Is the shell for the screen and everything appears to be larger than the base Switch. I'm not sure if it's larger than the Switch OLED. It may or may not be. But either way, it should be bigger. I think this is definitely a real leak. Especially because we saw something like this with the Switch Lite before that got revealed. They had leaked the back shell for the Switch Lite, and a lot of people said, "Oh, this isn't real," but I was pretty sure looking at it is like, this looks like a real thing, and sure enough, it was. So, and that's not to toot my own horn. It's just like, I'm not the only person who was saying that, but I looked at it and I thought that it looked legitimate, and it turns out it was. So I think that this very well could be. Either way, I just want Nintendo to go ahead and reveal this. And I want them to say it's not going to have an OLED screen so that I can resist the temptation to buy one at launch. Because I really can't afford it right now. I just can't. And I think someone was saying, I can't remember if this was just speculation or if it was an actual supposed leak, that it's probably going to be $400 when it launches, which, I mean, I think realistically, if it's as much of an improvement over the original Switch, it makes sense. Having 3 times the RAM is certainly helpful. Obviously, it's going to have its own custom chip. Well, I would assume, based on the obvious investment that Nvidia has made in Nintendo and how well the Switch did, that Nvidia would be happy to make a custom chip specifically for the Switch instead of just throwing in their X1, the Tegra X1. So it's going to be interesting to see when this gets revealed. I'm hoping it's soon. I just want to see what's going on with this thing. I'm super curious. And I mean, it could be that, like I was predicting before, it'll be in October, just like the original Switch was. Could be later. I mean, who knows? I wonder how much time there was in between that Switch Lite leak and when the Switch Lite was actually announced, because I don't really remember. But I'm curious about that. Either way, we'll just have to wait and see what comes up. I don't know. But if they did do an OLED screen, I would probably have to make it happen. Even if I have to sell some stuff in order to buy it at launch, I would probably have to. I mean, at that point, I would probably just hand me down the original Switch to my oldest son or something, and then my wife could have the OLED one, and I could have the new OLED, the Switch 2 OLED. But right now, I'm not really expecting that, and I'm not really sure. Well, I guess there's a whole lot of different things that they could potentially announce whenever they announce this. I think that's what I'm curious about more than anything else, is seeing what kind of games they're going to announce, because I mean, for one, I can't imagine there's going to be anything they'll announce that I won't already be able to play on Steam Deck, and potentially still better. But I mean, it's really hard to say. Just have to wait and see. Okay, that's enough of that. Any other thoughts?
No, sir.
Well, speaking of games that will be coming to the Switch and as well as other platforms, it was announced that Freedom Wars, which was originally on the PlayStation Vita, is getting a remaster coming January 9th, 2025, and that is going to be on the PS5, PS4, Switch, and PC. Yeah, so what are your thoughts?
So I honestly, until I saw the announcement and saw the trailer, I didn't know too much about the game. Looking at it, I looked at it and it sort of reminds me somewhat vaguely. I mean, I could be wrong because based on the gameplay footage I saw, but also vaguely remind me of sort of like of God Eater in a sense. Because is it I mean, I didn't watch too much gameplay footage, but it's sort of like mission based, and you're sort of like in a squad. Okay, so yeah, so because of that, it definitely reminds me of that God Eater sort of Monster Hunter-esque structure. I mean, granted, both of those games I enjoyed, so I feel like this is a game that I definitely would enjoy as well. Obviously, I never played it before. One reason I never had a Vita, but it is interesting the fact that a game that was a Sony exclusive, being brought back all these years, and also multi-platform at that, is great. I like it. I mean, it's kind of it's funny and it's also sad that it's not coming to Xbox, but it is at least breaking out of the PlayStation only platform, and it kind of makes me wonder. I mean, granted, this was done by the same studio, I think. It kind of makes me kind of hope maybe still eventually we might get Gravity Rush, but I'm not gonna really hold my breath too much on that. But yeah, I mean, I'm overall though I'm excited about this. I'm looking forward to trying this out. Maybe not at launch, but sometime. But yeah, I'll definitely check this out.
So I've never finished it. I played a decent chunk. This came out 10 years ago, and I got it when it launched. This is a Japan Studio game, which also, like you, gives me more hope about Gravity Rush, because Gravity Rush games were also Japan Studio. And the fact that they're bringing this back, I think is fantastic, because I think it deserved more love. In fact, I think this was probably the last actual PlayStation published game on the Vita.
Oh.
Because they just abandoned the Vita. Or at least new game. I mean, they may have done the Ratchet and Clank collection after that, but the Ratchet and Clank collection was the PS2 games just put on the Vita. I guess it's more port of the PS3 versions of the games. But anyway, just lower frame rate. So in terms of this game, what I played of it, I really liked for the most part. The concept behind it is that you are in this futuristic world where, based on crimes you commit or crimes that have been committed, people will receive sentences of like 1 million years. And the way that they reduce their sentences is they fight these alien monsters. At least I think it's aliens. I can't quite remember. It's been a long time. And it is very Monster Hunter like, at least in terms of the actual combat. It's very Monster Hunter like. I don't think there's really like any armor stuff necessarily from that standpoint. I think it's more just like more appearance and weapons. You can it says on here, customize your appearance, class, and weapons. So yeah, I'm pretty sure there's nothing apart from appearance. Like you're not cutting off monster parts in order to make armor and that sort of thing. Like I said, it's been a long time since I really played it, and I didn't get very far in it. The one thing that is that really slowed down the gameplay for me is initially this prison that you're in is super strict to where until you have like earned certain ranks, you can't even do things like run around. You have to walk everywhere. So it's like your movement is very slow. And I mean and that's not when you're on the battlefield. That's just when you're in the prison. And as you progress, you get the ability, for that. This game was definitely a graphical showcase for the Vita. Like it's one of the best looking games on the system, without question. One of the things that drew me to it most was the anime art style and everything else. And what I played, it was fun. Like I really like the combat. I really liked it a lot. I just never got super far. And I mean, I don't remember specifically what took me away from it, but it's one of those that I've always wanted to get back to. And I had contemplated at times using my Vita TV, which is like the little handheld or the little console thing that you can connect to your TV that plays Vita games and PSP, PS1 classics, things like that. Also, the thing did remote play for PS4. And it actually looked pretty decent, even with the image stretched out on a TV. But now that it's coming to other platforms, that definitely makes me more interested. And I'm not sure about whether I would attempt to do a three-way comparison between the Switch, Vita, and Steam Deck for this game, even though I would love to. Mostly it's because I am not sure about how much time I would need to record. I don't think I would need nearly as much as like I do with Persona 4 Golden, because Persona 4 Golden, it just takes so long to get into the action that it felt more necessary. With this game, it's not quite like that. But I do seem to remember it still takes a little bit to get into the action. But yeah, I'm like it's really fun. Everything I remember about this game is that it was fun. And I definitely want to give it another shot. I mean, I'm honestly kind of tempted to just boot this up on my Vita, but I think what I will probably end up doing is I will maybe even, well, first of all, just kind of regain my bearings, see if I even still have a save for this, because I don't know if I do. I might be able to find one on like my Vita TV or something, because I know I transferred my save over there. But maybe try doing that and see if I can refamiliarize myself, and then just get the footage recorded early, like really early, long before the other versions come out, so that I already have one portion done and go from there. But regardless, I'm excited that they're doing this. I'm hoping that this is going to mean more Japan Studio games will make their way over, especially Gravity Rush 1 and 2. And yeah, I mean, I'm kind of surprised that it got announced when it did, especially if this rumored PlayStation Showcase ends up being a thing, because it seems like that would be a good place to announce it. But we'll get into that here shortly. So, any other thoughts?
I'll just say, I guess maybe the reason why they didn't show it, didn't show a case, or wouldn't show a case there, is because Bandai Namco is publishing it. So maybe that could be the reason why.
True. That could very well be the reason, and of course, because Japan Studio is no longer part of their thing. So yeah, like I might even just pull out my Vita and try this game out sometime soon. I don't know. We'll see. All right. Anything else before we move into the next story?
No, sir.
All right. So as we mentioned, there is a rumored PlayStation Showcase coming up next week. And going along with this, the ESRB just rated Horizon Zero Dawn Remastered, which we've talked about before. Thoughts about both?
Well, I guess getting this out of the way, I think having a state of play is possibly a good thing to have. I mean, especially coming off the coattails of the PS5 Pro release. If they actually show some new games to play on there, I think that would be great. I mean, sure, of course, they were showing off the fact that you have the enhanced modes for current PS5 games, but to actually show some newer games that one could say takes advantage of the hardware would be a plus. So hopefully maybe they'll show something new. Perhaps they won't, but it maybe so. As far as Horizon Zero Dawn, why are we doing this again? Why? I mean, granted, it's not like they remastered it already or did any sort of remake, but why is it gotta be God of War, Horizon, and Last of Us? Why are those the only games that Sony wants to remaster when they have other games they could do this with, like Bloodborne, for crying out loud? They could be doing this with Infamous. They could be doing this with, they could possibly even do this, like, say, Jak and Daxter. Like, where's that? We haven't had Jak and Daxter in years. I mean, but it's so frustrating that, I mean, I really believe this is gonna be true. I mean, this is likely definitely going to be at this alleged state of play, and it's just like, going back to what I said, why not show something new? You're showing us a PS4 game that is getting a remaster. I'm just like, I just bang my head against the wall because Sony is not giving us what we want. Okay, what I want really, but what a lot of gamers want, which is Bloodborne. Where's that? I mean, like I said, the emulation community is going to give us Bloodborne before Sony does at this rate, and I mean, considering the fact that they've been making incredible leaps and bounds as of late, I mean, it definitely seems more possible, likely sooner than later. But yeah, but I really cannot fathom why they have to keep remastering these PS4 games. I mean, even if I ignore Bloodborne, I really feel like it's really too soon to just be porting and remastering your PS4 catalog when you could be going back further to other games from like your PS3 days, and maybe even go back further to maybe some games that were on the PS2 or something like that. I don't get why they are only focusing on these on these three sole franchises, when they could be focusing on anything else, and it just baffles me. Because I mean, what's next? Are they going to now have Horizon Zero Dawn remake, and then like when the PS6 comes out, Horizon Zero Dawn remake remaster? And I'm just like, oh, I'm sorry, they're gonna save that for Last of Us first. I'm sorry, I can't be getting at my things out of order, but I really just can't get it. But I mean, I do think a state of play is definitely likely. But again, I hope that they would show something completely new, and not even something that is a necessarily remaster. Like, I mean, I don't think there's really any reason to show this. I mean, they probably might, but don't show Until Dawn. Like, we already know that's coming. We get that, and they've already sort of shown off the graphical differences already as it is between the PS4 version and the PS5 version. So I don't really think they need to focus on that at all. But yeah, that's pretty much everything. I mean, if they want to surprise us with something new, that would be great, but I'm not really gonna hold my breath on that. But who knows? Maybe also, jumping back, maybe they might say, well, in addition to, bringing back our Freedom Wars from Japan Studio, we're going to also bring back Gravity Rush as well and have this nice collection for the PS5 and PC. But again, I'll hold my breath there.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you the reason why they're focused on PS4 games. And it's simply because of the fact that those are the easiest to port, and they know people will still buy them. Even though, of course, Horizon Zero Dawn already has a 60 FPS patch on PS5. I can't imagine they're going to do anything to make it better. I could see them changing Aloy's appearance to make her look closer to how she looks on Forbidden West, where she's less attractive. Just because, they would probably do that. They've done that with other characters before as well, so that's what I'm expecting is going to be one of the reasons they're doing it. I mean, I'm not sure what they could do gameplay-wise what they could bring over from Forbidden West to Zero Dawn to make it better. Because really the only thing that I can think of that specifically is like a new feature in Forbidden West that isn't in Zero Dawn that's actually like a really good feature would be something that they'd have to really mess around and it would change the game too much, I think. And that's the hook shot thing, or the grappling hook that they have in Forbidden West, because that's really the one thing that Forbidden West has that Zero Dawn does not, that makes a dramatic difference in traversal. And I guess they also have the glider, which they clearly took from Breath of the Wild, but that's fine. I mean, it was a good feature to take from Breath of the Wild. Yeah. So, as far as the PlayStation Showcase, because I believe that's what they're saying, is that it's a showcase, not a state of play. Because state of play typically focuses more on like third-party stuff. Showcase is specifically supposed to be first-party, even though the last showcase wasn't all that much. But I think that it would make perfect sense for them to have the showcase so that they can show off some actual first-party games. I'm hoping that even if a bunch of it is just remasters, that they do something that they have at least some new stuff there. Because it's like, okay, Horizon Zero Dawn Remastered, guaranteed to be there. It's going to be shown, assuming this PlayStation Showcase is real, it's going to be shown there. There's a potential we could see Freedom Wars, at least, mentioned in a highlight reel or something, because of the fact that it is coming to PS4 and PS5. And of course that one's also PC day one, so that's great. PC and Switch day one. Like, I know what things I want to see. I want to see the Gravity Rush games. I want to see Bloodborne. I want to see Infamous. I would love to get a Sly Cooper collection with all 4 games. Even though one of them is, not made by Sucker Punch, but in many ways it's probably my favorite of those games. There's so many things that they could bring back that would be older games that would be much more worthwhile than just bringing back something from PS4 that literally you already have a version that does all of that that you can play on the PS5, and you don't have to buy it a second time. I mean, like, one of the guys I've mentioned before who does lots of platinums and everything, he said that he knows that he's part of the problem, but he would buy Horizon Zero Dawn Remastered as long as he had the ability to re-earn all the trophies. And it's like, okay, I get it. And it has been, to be fair, it's been 6 years since... Actually, no, 7 years. Wait. Came out 2017, so...
Yeah, that would be 7 years.
Yeah, 7 years. It's been 7 years since the game originally came out. So, from that standpoint, it's like, okay, it's been a reasonable amount of time. But the fact is that you can already play Zero Dawn on PS5 at 60 frames per second. there's just no reason for this except the fact that they can sell people product that will have minimal improvements. It will be as much of an improvement over the original version as Last of Us Part 2 was. Although Last of Us Part 2 is a much shorter gap between. Anyway. Either way, I'm hoping that they do have a showcase soon because I would like to see what else is coming to PC, because pretty much all these games now, anytime they do a remaster, it's coming to PS5 and PC the same day. That's what's been the case so far. I mean, they did with Until Dawn. They're doing it with Freedom Wars. What else was there? I mean, obviously Helldivers was day and date. Concord, as short-lived as it was day and date. It seems like anytime they do these remasters, though, they're going to be probably day and date going forward. I think that was the only reason that they didn't do that earlier with like Last of Us Part 1, for example, was because of the fact that they just hadn't had their studios ready long enough to have it prepared in time. I think otherwise it probably would have been day and date. But anyway, lots of stuff that they could reveal. I'm hoping that they do reveal something. But my guess is that they're probably going to do some PS5 Pro enhanced titles, which gets us to our next topic. And that is the fact that apparently that, despite everything they were saying about the PS5 Pro in the presentation last week, enhanced patches for the PS5 Pro for these various games, most of which were on the PS4, are not going to guarantee 60 frames per second. There's still going to be games at 30 frames per second, even in the enhanced PS5 version. So, of course, I have my thoughts on this. I don't think we want to spend too much time on it, but go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, this is... I mean, granted, this is something that we kind of basically already know, that the game PS4 enhanced games will be 4K 60. We know it's just like PR speak. Like, it's not something that's going to be guaranteed. And I almost feel like Sony came out ahead of time to, just get ahead of the fact that, like, say, like when people say like, hey, this isn't running at 4K 60 FPS, they're like, okay, yeah, we're going to say that not every game is going to do it, but, we're going to try to have a lot of games be running at 60 FPS. And I'm just wondering to myself, this could possibly be avoided had you kept your goals more realistic, which is something I said before. Stop trying to focus on 4K 60 FPS, because not every game will be able to run at 4K 60 FPS. And like, if they had focused on something more realistic, then it would have been a whole lot better. Like, something that could be a better standard. And sure, you might have games that do a whole lot better and games that actually could, run at 4K 60 FPS. And you might even have games that might not necessarily always hit 4K 60 FPS. But if you have something that's more standard, more baseline, then that's more acceptable. Like, something that where you could say the majority of games, where you could say like maybe 75-80% of games will run at this resolution at this frame rate. That's great. When you're running something that might run at 4K 60 FPS, that's not really a good guarantee there. And the fact they say that, that the article said that we could see PS5 Pro enhanced games that run between 1080p and 1440p at... Oh, wait, no, I'm sorry. I was saying that was on the base PS5. Never there. So you might still have games hitting 30 FPS, and you might have games that are not even hitting... that might be using a variable
refresh rate
resolution. So like,
yeah.
I mean, it's just sad that that they're really sort of like just setting themselves up for failure. I mean, granted, they said it's not a guarantee, as I guess that little legal speak is saying like, yeah, here's some little asterisk here. Not all games run at 60 FPS, but maybe if you set your sights a little more realistically, then you wouldn't have to worry about saying not all games run at this, because again, like I said before, if they had said every single game, no matter what game it is, will be able to run at 1080p 60 FPS, I could applaud them for actually targeting something that's realistic and, you know, attainable and still being decent. If they said we're gonna try to target 1440p 60 FPS for every game, I could have. I mean, I might not be able to do it, but I could have still applaud it because that's something that is more reasonable. But just saying 4K 60 FPS in games, and then again, this is for enhanced games, and you're not even hitting 30. You're not. I mean, gosh, not even hitting 60 FPS in all games is. Wow, that's just, yeah. And again, and the PS5 Pro is not even out yet, so which, you know, sort of makes people say like, well, don't worry, we'll just wait for the PS6, which is like, what's the point of the PS5 Pro then? But yeah, that's pretty much everything.
Yeah. Yeah, so recently it came out also, and this isn't a story, but I think it fits with the topic anyway, that Alan Wake 2, its enhancement for PS5 Pro is going to be that it will be running at 864p and 60 frames per second. So clearly, this thing is not that much of a step up. Now, of course, you have plenty of people who are still going to buy it because they're okay with the incremental upgrades. They might think, oh yeah, there's definitely some major differences here. And I mean, I suppose there are some differences, but it's just not as significant as they want you to believe. It's just not worth it. I mean, the fact that they had to do the zoom in enhance thing in order to show like these little tiny details that nobody's going to notice unless they're just sitting there and staring at, you know, still, you know, either still images or you know, like the Spider-Man stuff they showed where it's just he's sitting on a lamppost and looking at the trees and stuff. It's like, yeah, it looks great, but most people are not going to notice this in normal gameplay. They're just not. And oh my goodness, it's just, people need to understand the PS5 is not doing what it's saying it's doing. Yes, it does upscale to 4K. And that's great. That's great that they have the ability to upscale. And most of these games, they look so realistic in general that it's fine. I mean, you know, that it's not as noticeable that it's just upscaling because they just put a lot of detail into their graphics. But ultimately, this whole thing was intended to sell 4K TVs, or rather, I should say, the PS4 Pro was intended to help sell 4K TVs, and now because 4K TVs are so common, they feel the need to have 4K on the box, even though they're not actually rendering at 4K, because real 4K looks significantly better than this upscaled 4K. But anyway, I'm not going to keep going down this same rabbit hole that we go over and over again. In the end, you're better off waiting for the PlayStation 6. And if you don't have any other thoughts, we can move on into the topic about the PlayStation 6.
Go right ahead.
So apparently, the PlayStation 6 already has some information out about it, which is pretty crazy considering we just heard about the PS5 Pro. So according to Insider Gaming, PlayStation 6 is going to have an AMD chip with backwards compatibility, which isn't surprising seeing as how these are basically, I mean, really, since the PS4, they've had more or less PC architecture. There's a report from Reuters that the PS6 will feature an AMD chip in the system again, which isn't surprising. And see if there's anything else here. Okay, so there's really nothing else to it. Just that it's AMD chip and that as such it's going to have backwards compatibility. So there's not much of anything to say here from my perspective. I don't have any comments beyond that. Do you have any thoughts?
Just some questions I have about certain things. I mean, like, one of the things that was mentioned was the fact the reason why, or at least one of the reasons why Sony went with AMD over Intel is because of backwards compatibility. And I'm just wondering, would it I mean, obviously I don't design consoles, so I can't say, is it really that much of a difference between the two different iGPUs slash APUs, whereas changing it would cause you to lose all sense of backwards compatibility? I mean, I don't recall what other systems have had in the past. I mean, granted, for example, what was it? The original Xbox had a combination of NVIDIA slash Intel, but I'm not certain if the Xbox 360 had that, and yet it still had backwards compatibility, at least to my understanding. So like, would switching to Intel all of a sudden cause the PS6 to lose backwards compatibility? Because I was just very curious about that. Because I mean, in essence, would that essentially mean that AMD sort of has a stronghold on on future generations of the PlayStation consoles, just because Sony wants the next generation to be backwards compatible with the previous generation? That's just something I'm very curious about.
Yeah. I mean, AMD has been the primary manufacturer for these consoles from that standpoint for years. It's really, Nintendo was the first one to switch over to NVIDIA. At least, I mean, like I said, I don't know about like back to the original Xbox or the 360, but at least for a number of years, AMD had, they had Nintendo, they had PlayStation, and then, like PlayStation had their own custom chip, at least, custom CPU for the PS3. But yeah, so there's not much to say about that. It's actually, I was thinking that there was more information than there was about the PS6, but it's not really surprising about that. I do think it's funny though. Some people were asking, why are they already making the PS6? And it's like, this is normal. They release one and then they start working on the next one, and that's as simple as that. So, but yeah. Okay, PS6 is going to have backwards compatibility. Guess what? PC has backwards compatibility for the past like 30 plus years of games, for the most part. You can play almost anything. So, yep. Okay, that's enough of that. All right, so we do have one more topic tonight. All right, well, why don't you take it away?
Yeah. Okay. So, recently the Annapurna Interactive publishing studio and indie game publishing studio, the entire team resolved. They walked out as following a dispute with the group's owner, Mega Ellison, just because there was recently Annapurna, at least as far as the overarching company, there have been talks to like expand outside of games, and so to also work with, say, film and stuff. So for example, there's going to be a Control, I believe it's a TV series, and also possibly movies as well. So I think the branch of Annapurna is called Annapurna Pictures. So they're working on Control, working with Remedy to make a Control series, TV series and movies, and also working on some other stuff as well. And also they're going to be working with Remedy to work on Control 2 as well. But the entire team, though, has had a disagreement. As a result, they walked out. And in case you didn't know, or at least don't know what games that Annapurna Interactive put out like games they publish. They publish games such as Outer Wilds, Stray, and there's one more that on the tip of my tongue. I can't remember. I think there's one game that's called. I can't remember if this is how it's pronounced or if it's just like the letters. It's like AI or something like that. Which, from what I've heard, is a very interesting type of atmospheric game. But yeah, those are the games that off the top of my head that I know that they've put out there. And did they? I don't think they put out Sifu, but I almost want to say that they helped publish that. Or but yeah, but those are just some of the games that off the top of my head that I can think of that they put out there. But also one last thing that was also mentioned was the fact that so far, at least what they said, I believe who is this? The communications director. He said that despite what has happened with the walkout, current plans for like film production, also like Control 2, has not come to a halt. So like nothing has happened to stop current production for other projects that are being done right now.
Yeah, this is definitely an interesting thing. The staff leaving like that. I'm just wondering, what exactly was the dispute? Was it just because of the choice to get involved in films, or I don't know. It's bizarre to me that you would have an entire staff quit like that. So, I mean, at least they're not like ending their plans for like their previous commitments to games and everything else, because Annapurna does do lots of indie games, and I mean, of course, I'm a huge fan of Outer Wilds. I played through it on mostly Steam Deck, a little bit on Steam, and teeny tiny bit on Switch. And I know that there's other games they've done too that I played. I just can't remember off the top of my head which ones they were. But I don't know. This is just a weird situation. Yeah, you have to wonder what was it that caused these people to leave, and I mean, it's got to be something significant for that, and that's concerning. Now, the idea of Annapurna being involved with Control 2, and being involved with a Control's TV series, like, I'm really interested in that because I thought Control was super interesting, the story, and of course the gameplay was fantastic. So, like, for one, of course, I'm very interested in the sequel. Two, I'm very interested in the TV show. As long as it sticks to what made Control so good, then it will be great. If they try to basically do what they did to the Halo TV series, where they just completely destroy the characters, then I wouldn't be so interested. But I don't know. I don't know what to think about. This is such a weird situation. So I don't know. That's all I have.
Yeah, and I mean, it's definitely, I would definitely say it's definitely bad when the fact that the president of Annapurna Interactive also joins in with the walkouts. Like, when you actually have someone who's the head of things leaving with the rest of the group, that personally speaks volumes to me. And I was trying to figure out more about who Megan Ellison even is. The fact that they were arguing with her. I mean, like, so far it seems like mostly what she's been doing has been with film and stuff like that. So I don't know if maybe something similar to what you said about with like concerns about like with stuff turning out like Halo or something like that, if that possibly could be a reason. I mean, granted, this is just speculation on my end. Could there be something where maybe they feel like they could be stretched too thin with things? I mean, granted, if they're working with Remedy, I would hope that they would also have the assistance to not have too much on their plate to work with. But yeah, I don't know. And I mean, I mean, granted, I also don't know like what Ellison's role in things would be, considering the fact that it seems like she's primarily just working with the film branch. I mean, she also founded, from what I see, Annapurna Interactive in 2011, so she has been around for a good while. So, you know, I don't know if like things have been bubbling for a while. I don't know if this is just something that's really sudden, but it's definitely very interesting to see. And you know, I'm hoping that whatever comes out of this, you know, I hope that things are able to be resolved, that you know, that the team is able to get a satisfactory resolution. But it's definitely a sad thing to see, but I hope things get better here.
Yeah. Well, I guess we'll just see what happens. Not really anything else we can do. So, all right. Anything else you want to talk about before we close out for the night?
No, sir.
All right. Recommendations and dissuasions.
All right. I forgot my recommendations initially, so let me just make sure I have it right here. And okay, I did not actually write them down. Okay, so here's one recommendation that we'll actually have, though. So when you get to in Kingdom Hearts Rechain of Memories, when you get to the 13th floor as Sora in Castle Oblivion, your card should primarily have a value of 9. You could probably get, yeah, definitely always have 9. Like I said, you might have a couple zeros that you save primarily for the boss fights, but 9 should be your standard at that point. You shouldn't have anything lower than that. You might have, well, I mean, granted, 9's the highest thing there is, but only maybe have no more than 6 8s. Nothing lower than an 8, because the Neo Shadows there will play 8s very consistently, to the fact that they will be breaking your cards if you're not playing a 9. And that has happened to me when I was trying to just get through the different areas, and also trying to grind as well. That made it very frustrating, because I would be trying to pull out a combo, and then my combo's broken because they pulled out an 8. It canceled my 8. So definitely carry plenty of 9s, have primarily 9s, and you know, maybe if you just have nothing but 9s, then that would be great. But yeah, definitely have mainly 9s. That's my recommendation.
All right. Well, my recommendation is going to be quite simply Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. Fantastic game. Even if the backtracking can be a real pain in the butt because of the map and that sort of thing. If you're just playing through the game normally, you don't care so much about getting all the collectibles, then you shouldn't have any problems. And it's a really solid game. You can easily turn down the difficulty if you find the normal is too difficult for you, or you get too annoyed. But really, it's not that difficult of a game, and it's worth playing. Well worth it. Especially if you can get it on discount, which, I mean, I did. I think I probably paid like $15 or something for it, but that was 2022 sometime. It was before I got my Steam Deck, so I know it was at least that far back. But yeah, good stuff. Not a very long game. Because of the fact that I spent so much time going through and getting all the collectibles, I had about 35 hours, I think. But I probably spent a good 5 or 6 hours at least of that just trying to find collectibles or scans or areas in sections of the map that I hadn't discovered yet. So, yeah. Anyway, that's what I got for recommendations, at least that I can remember. So your dissuasion or dissuasions.
This dissuasion is going to be something that was sort of passed on to me, some advice that I was given, and that is for doing a sort of strength training lifting. Don't try to cheat when you're doing your reps. Don't try to sort of throw your body out when you're trying to perform a lift, because you might end up injuring yourself in the worst case scenario, or even sort of like the best case scenario. If you're trying to work on a particular muscle group or muscle, you're not going to be really focusing on that muscle, because you are also incorporating other muscle groups as well into your lift, or whatever sort of strength training thing you're working on. So even if you're not able to maybe hit all of your reps, it's better to try to pull through with your form and do it correctly than to try to hit all your reps, but you're sort of just like pulling with your entire back to like get something done instead. So don't try to cheat in your strength training. Just do it correct and try to avoid injury that way.
All right. Yeah, some of the ones I do, I'm not entirely sure if I'm doing it correctly, but I've never had anyone specifically show me, and so some of them I'm just kind of faking it. I've actually had this weird pain in this portion of my arm right here that's been consistent for a while, and I don't really know what caused it or if there's anything I can do to fix it. I haven't been willing to go to the doctor because it's expensive, but it's definitely painful sometimes when I'm doing some of my lifting. So I don't know. I just try to suck it up and deal with it. Get through the reps. But yeah, anyway. My dissuasion is related to using Joy-Cons with the Nintendo Switch wirelessly. So, something that I discovered is that the main reason I may have been having issues with my Joy-Cons before was because of the fact that there's too much wireless interference around where I had my Switch dock, because we have our wireless router up on the mantle, and then I have the dock up there as well. And initially I tried just moving it over because I was still having some issues with interference when we were trying to play Mario Party the other day. But that didn't seem to really help enough. It still seems like there's too much interference because of all the wireless signals. And so we ended up, since we already have a Switch dock on our TV over here, I just brought the Switch in here, and then we all sat in here and played, and we didn't have any issues. So I think that the wireless interference is the problem. So don't make sure that you don't have, if you're using Joy-Cons wirelessly, especially if you have a bunch of them that you're trying to connect all at once, make sure, don't have your Switch near a wireless router or anything that has a bunch of wireless signals. So
Definitely good to know.
All right, that's all I got. So, where can people find you?
They can find me on my channel, I am Xeracon. That's IAMXERACON. So youtube.com/@IamXeracon. Nothing new this past week. However, I am working on a video which is focused on my my rekindled disdain for tedious farming in games, and I also have a special little project, a little fun project that I'm working on. I have to do quite a bit of editing for that, trying to find some, or also make some clips for that, but just something very fun that that popped into my mind recently, so I'm gonna work on that as well. The first video should come out, might come out earliest Sunday, if not Monday or Tuesday, something like that. But the other video will come down sometime later, maybe in a month or so. But yeah.
All right, good stuff. Well, you can find me on my gaming channel at the Frozen Gamer 87. That's on YouTube, and haven't put anything up new for a bit, just because of needing to take a break and also trying to figure out what I'm doing going forward. As of right now, the plan is next week to have my next comparison up, which would be for Outer Wilds between the Switch and the Steam Deck. I think that should be pretty doable, because it's only about 22 to 24 minutes total. I mean, like the cycle for the game's day, or the cycle before the sun explodes is 22 minutes long, and then I just have that plus the time it takes to start up the game in the first place. So theoretically, I should be able to get that recorded, and then it's just a matter of editing, which, since it's much shorter, it shouldn't take nearly as long. But regardless of any of that, I want to put up more content. I just am not entirely sure what I'm doing yet, and right now I'm just have a full schedule. So it's a matter of figuring that out, trying to maintain a balance between doing that as well as my job, my actual paying job, and getting time with my family and maintaining sanity and actually getting some gaming in as well. But yeah, there's a lot. So we'll see how things go with that. But I am hoping to start getting some more consistent content pretty soon here. Then I also have my YouTube cooking channel, Not Authentic But Delicious. That's YouTube at NABD Cooking. Once again, there hasn't been anything new for a bit, but it's really just a matter of getting stuff edited. I do have at least 4 recipes recorded, might be 5. So I'm planning to have a new recipe up next week. I haven't decided which one it is yet, but it will probably be my Japanese curry breakfast burrito. I also am going to try to rework thumbnails a bit, maybe do thumbnails without the words in them so that people just look at the food and they're curious about what it is a little bit more. But I haven't really... It's just a matter of finding the time to do these things. So there's a variety of different things I need to do, and I do want to start getting stuff up consistently again, because most of those videos don't take that long to edit. I mean, I can have it typically edited 2 to 3 hours at the most. Usually doesn't even take that long. It takes longer to render than it does to edit. So yeah, there's that. And then, of course, we have the YouTube channel for the Orange Box Podcast, which is at the Orange Box Podcast. If you are listening to the audio-only version, we have, and that comes out every Friday at 12 a.m. Central Time on all major podcast platforms. That's Apple Podcasts, YouTube Music, Spotify, Amazon Music, Deezer, iHeartRadio. Basically anywhere that you are looking for a podcast, you should be able to find the audio-only version. But additionally, we have our YouTube channel, as I mentioned, and the YouTube channel has the video version of the podcast, which, in addition to seeing our beautiful faces, you also have the ability to see clips of games we've been playing. If there is a new trailer for some game that has been shown in like a Nintendo Direct or a PlayStation State of Play or an Xbox Showcase or the Game Awards or any number of other things, we'll typically have those playing during the video version. And additionally, just as with the audio-only version, there is always video game music included from a variety of different games, so that you have an opportunity to hear some great music in addition to listening to us and potentially making our voices more interesting. Now, I do want to note, of course, if you have any questions or comments, if you have anything that you want to say to us, you can, of course, comment on the video version of the podcast. Additionally, you can email us, theorangeboxpodcast@gmail.com. You can also tweet us, or I don't know what the new term would be, but you can contact us on Twitter or X at the Orange Box Pod, and although it's not something we regularly mess with other than reposting the episode. If, of course, you reach out to us, be sure to get back to you. If it's something that you want us to read on the show, we'll happily do it. If you don't want it read on the show, that's fine too. And if you never comment, you never have a question, and if nobody's even listening, we're still going to talk for 2.5 hours every week, because this is how we catch up. This is our outlet to talk about video games, or at least it's my outlet. And it's just a great opportunity to catch up with a buddy week to week. So that is everything, I think. So yeah. Last chance. Any final thoughts?
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, I am the Frozen Gamer 87. That is I am Zaracon. We are the Orange Box Podcast, and until next time, drink some black coffee. Orange Box Podcast out.